welcome back. This is now officially week 2 of the coronavirus phenomenon that we might call it. And so again, I'm Pastor Zac, this is Pastor Mark, and we're coming to you with our next video in our series on wisdom. And so as I'm thinking about all of this, about the situation that we find ourselves in, I really am thinking that wisdom is a very necessary thing right now for how we navigate these interesting days with social isolation and maybe with some of us feeling a little bit lonely and as we're now not with our friends every day and our schedules are now being sort of thrown up in the air and everything's up for grabs and we don't know how it's all going to work out and it all feels pretty uncertain. And so wisdom is God's gift to us for how we navigate all of life. And this is part of life. Things like this are part of life. And so today we're going to come to you with Proverbs 19 verse 21. This is a good proverb that helps us to understand that things do not always go our way, which is something that a lot of us are learning and painfully learning even right now in these few weeks, and then with the rest of the semester now sort of being put on pause and probably not going to happen as far as we can tell. And so I'm going to have Mark read it if he can find it.
Sure.
Proverbs 19:21.
All right, got it. Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails.
Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. This is a similar proverb to other proverbs in the book of Proverbs, such as Proverbs 16:9, where it says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." And if there's one thing that we can learn from this, there's several things that we can learn, but the idea here being communicated to us is that things do not always go the way we plan them. And this can be a very difficult thing. For many of us, this coronavirus situation has meant the end of our senior year, or maybe our junior year, any year in high school that you are. Freshman year of college. It has meant the end of something that you expected and you thought it was going to be a certain way. For others, it's meant the end of sports. Maybe you were looking forward to playing baseball or volleyball or soccer or being on the track team or softball. And so your sport now, your spring sport is now done. It's canceled and you don't get to enjoy it the way you thought that you were going to. Or for others, it's meant the end of your robotics club and you haven't been able to compete. You didn't get to see your robot actually go to the conference and do its thing, and so that can be something to be sad about. And for others, it will mean that you don't get to go to your junior senior banquet or your prom. And so there's all these expectations that have now been sort of ruined, essentially. And this is something that I've experienced now in my own life. As many of you may know, Bailey and I are now married. And while this is a really cool thing and we're really enjoying being married, this is now the 5th day of marriage. It's not how we expected it to be. And especially for Bailey, I can tell you that it's been a hard thing to adjust to this situation and having to sort of kiss her dream wedding ceremony goodbye, where all of our friends and family would be there for us for that big day. As Bailey's an event coordinator, she loves to plan things, and so she's been having this idea in her head for years, really her whole life, as most girls do. And now this plan that she's been having has been sort of pushed aside. And while we still may get a reception at some point down the road, this whole feeling of having this perfect event come together has collapsed, and so we don't get to experience that. And so this can be a time for struggling with what could have been and sort of wrestling through some of the emotions that come with that, of feeling like you've been stripped of something that you were so looking forward to. And so as we reflect on this proverb, I think there are a few things we can really learn and take home. How does this help us to deal with the feelings that we have when we are faced with situations that don't just go our way? So I want to hear what your thoughts are on this, Mark, first.
Yeah, well, I often in my sermons I'll use this illustration of the ditch on both sides of an issue. I've mentioned once before, I know Double Ditch Road in Northwest Washington, where you got to make sure you're going right down the middle because there's a deep ditch on both sides, and this is one of those issues. Planning has ditches on both sides. So the one side is you can hold your plan so tightly that if anything, like not even just it getting canceled, but if anything isn't even perfect, like sort of the bridezilla, right? Now I'm not saying Bailey was that way at all, but we know there are those bridezillas, and there are those people who have all their hopes and dreams in a very specific plan, whether that's getting into a certain college, that's getting into a certain career, that's sports stuff, just sort of having all of life exactly figured out. That's the ditch on one side, because this has taught us those plans are essentially futile if something like this outbreak happens. Now, the ditch on the other side is to make no plan, right? And so that could be the reaction of young people probably moving forward, people who have been really burned by this closure of everything. It could probably be to either, I'm really going to plan something that could never be ruined, which, you know, there could be all kinds of amazing and unforeseen ways that it could be ruined. Like, we never had even thought of an outbreak happening in our country when we were growing up, and now this has happened. So it could be ruined if you plan too much, or some people could come out of this thinking, I'm just not going to make a plan because any plan could be ruined. And so, you know, live for today, carpe diem, right? And just kind of go with my gut a little bit, right? That's the ditch on the other side. And so this proverb is not teaching us to not make plans. We should be making financial plans. Even, you know, juniors and seniors need to start thinking about finances. Are you making good financial decisions in the college that you choose, and coupling that with the major that you choose? And you should be making plans about these things.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, not holding our plans so tightly where all of our self-worth is wrapped up in them, all of our emotions are wrapped up in them. Now, you know, Bailey is a great example, because it is good to wrap your emotions up in your wedding plans. That's totally understandable and fine. And so I'm glad Zac used the illustration. But is all of our, like I said, self-worth really getting tied to this plan and this dream, instead of tied to something that doesn't change, which is Christ and the Word of God, and you know, even other things like those are really the most unchanging things, but the promises of God in His Word, right? That He'll never leave us or forsake us, and that He'll be faithful. So hold those loose tightly, right?
Yeah.
And hold pretty much all of the things pretty loosely. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the first thing I thought of when I read this is that it humbles us.
Yeah.
This is a humbling passage. It puts us in our place. It helps us to see that we are not in control. And in today's world, it's more and more tempting to think that we really are in control. You know, sitting right here with my phone in my hand, I can not only connect to the internet and find out all kinds of information that 20 years ago would have been impossible for me to find out in this way, but I can also control the lights at my house right here.
Yeah.
I can touch a button and I can turn on my living room, or I can turn it off, and things like that. So we are tempted to feel like we're so in control of every little thing until someone in China eats a bat or whatever it was, and now it's all thrown off, and our plans are all askew, and we don't know what to make of it, and things are feeling very uncertain. So it should humble us, knowing that we never know what's going to happen. But as Mark said, we should also still be diligent to plan. Planning is still a good thing, but not holding those plans so tightly so as to get angry at God when those things don't come to be.
Yeah. And it's good to read, again, I know Pastor Zac loves church history and introducing you guys to what has happened in the past, and our generation and those people, the people living today, are the most controlling, probably, generation in all of world history, right? We're reading the Little House on the Prairie books to our kids right now, and those people, they lived totally self-sustaining life out on the prairie. They didn't see another person for 8 weeks, right? That's just how they lived. And they knew they had no control over the weather and over even how much food they were going to eat later that day. They hoped that they could catch a fish and then the Lord would provide for them that way. And so that's the way that all people of the world have lived until basically the 20th century, was subsistence living. And so when you read theologians, when you read our Reformed confessions, for example, I think it's Article 10 or Article 13 of the Belgic Confession and Question and Answer 10 of the Catechism, both talk about God's providence. And you get the sense in those old documents that the authors of those documents absolutely depended on God's care for them. They had no control, and they recognized it. And that's an idol, like I said in my sermon on Sunday, that has been shattered in our context and in our culture. The idol of control has been destroyed, and hopefully we're recognizing that now. And that's really what this proverb, I think, is trying to get at, is do not worship the idol of control, because your plans could come to ruin. God's plan will always remain. The Lord's purpose prevails, but we have all kinds of plans. Some of them happen, some don't, and just about every generation before has kind of realized that, unless you're some kind of royal person. But just about everybody else has seen that. We totally depend on God for food, for shelter, for clothes, for friends, for church. And now we see that. So it's been a blessing in that way, to recognize how much we were trying to control things in our lives.
And I know you had a different passage you wanted to share with us from Isaiah, right?
So yes, Isaiah 55 is maybe even some of the same words probably as that Proverbs text. Just a couple of verses, starting at verse 8, Isaiah 55 verse 8. For my thoughts, says the Lord, are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And with this I was thinking, sometimes it can feel like God's thoughts are so much higher because we just can't understand them. But I think we should also think God's thoughts are higher because they're so much better than ours.
Yeah. Amen.
Right? And so it's not just that they're so perfect and so full and so far-reaching that we can't understand them, like we can't understand everything in space or everything at the bottom of the ocean. That's not all this means. This also means God's plan is so much better than the plans that we have, that we should trust Him. This is meant to inspire trust, not, I'll give up because I'll just never understand God. In many other places, like in the book of Exodus, God says, you can know my way. He says, you don't have to search high up in the heavens for my way. You can know my law. You can know my will. You can understand who I am. God is telling us those things, and yet His ways are higher, and that they're so much better than our plans, than our thoughts, than our desires. Yeah. So hopefully that's an encouragement. We don't want it just to sound like with this proverb, you can't control anything, and so have a great day, young people, as you sit at home by yourselves. No, God's plans are perfect, and I think when our plans are ruined, we're going to be searching for a perfect plan, and that's God's plan. So know Him in His Word. You can know Him more and more fully as you read good books, and as you listen to Pastor Zac's teaching, and as you pray and do your devotions. But we're not going to exhaustively know Him because He's so good. That's a really more of a Puritan idea, really, in a lot of ways, that we are small and lowly, and God is lofty and majestic, and that's not just in His nature, that's in His goodness as well. Yeah. And so hopefully that encourages us to trust Him.
Yeah, so I would add to that, which I think that's perfect, because that leads into what I was going to say as well, that this proverb frees us, right, from total despair. Our plans may come to ruin, but the person who doesn't know the Lord, doesn't have that comfort, totally thinks that because their plans are ruined, that there's nothing left for them to do but to just be depressed and sad and to grieve. But we can know that, yes, we can be sad about our plans coming to ruin, but ultimately we know we can hedge our bets on God's goodness. We can rely and take comfort in that, knowing that though our plans may come to ruin, God's plans don't. And God's plans are good because of who He is. So even with my wedding not being the way we wanted it to be, we know that this is for our best, that this was God, how God intended it to be. And in that we can rest, and we can look for the good that will still come. And along with that, as I sort of already hinted at, this gives us comfort, knowing that though our plans may not be the way we wanted them to be, that we can still take comfort in God's goodness and God's sovereign care for us as He is watching over us and His plans are coming into be. We know that He works for the good of those who love Him, for those who are called according to His purpose. And so we can take great comfort in that, knowing that though our plans have collapsed, His plans haven't, and that His kingdom is still being built, and His plan is still going on. And that is something that Christians can lay their head to. We can lay our head to rest at night, knowing that God is still watching over everything. And so those are some good thoughts, I think, just to spur your thinking onto this passage. Hopefully now that you've watched this, you'll be able to have your good small group discussion time tonight in our live Zoom conference. So yeah, we'll catch you guys later. We'll see you tonight at 7:30. All right?
See you guys.